Today, we are here to talk about the aviation world in World War I. Just 10 years shortly after the Wright brothers, many were still skeptical of its dominance in military efforts. In the beginning of the war, many did not think it was capable of being a frontline fighter, so it was mainly used for reconnaissance and transport. As the war progressed, countries started implementing battles in the skies, and with the ever-demanding pressure of the war, engineers worked effortlessly on developing in the aviation world, forever changing the dominance of air superiority. Many believed 80% of aircraft during the Great War was powered by rotary engines. Half of the most notable aircraft during that time had rotary engines. The reason of its dominance was due to the favorable power-to-weight ratio, while larger or heavier aircraft relied many on inline or V-type engines. Although its popularity, rotary engines had many disadvantages, including very high fuel consumptions, partially due to the engine had to be run at full throttle majority of the time. Oil consumption was also very high due to primitive carburetors and the lack of a sump. Castor oil was ultimately chosen as the primary lubricant. Castor oil has the lubricating properties that were unaffected by fuel and pressure. This also made for an unfortunate side effect for the pilots. Many pilots inhaled and ingested large amounts of oil during flights, which caused persistent diarrhea as a symptom. Clothes were also routinely soaked in oil. And finally, the rotating force of the cylinders made the engine act like a large gyroscope. For many, this wasn't a concern until quick maneuvers were necessary. The effect became apparent when the gyroscoping precession became noticeable. The direction of the engine rotation made left turns extremely slow, as well as the tendency for the nose to rise up, while right turns were almost instantaneous with the tendency for the nose to drop.
As the war progressed, engineers and designers were faced with a challenge with ever-increasing power. Inline engines were the only option at that time that could meet the demand by improving the upper rev limits. Improvements with valve timing, the ignition system, and lightweight materials were a great contribution for making these higher revs possible. Another benefit was the aerodynamic characteristics of inline engines. They were more suitable for streamlining. Rotary engines were unable to increase their upper revs limits due to the drag of the rotating engines through air. As the RPM rose, the rotary engine was putting more power into spinning the engines and less remaining power to provide useful thrust through the propeller. With the development of power plants improving day by day, designers and engineers in all nations were also constantly improving the airframe itself. Most settled on the biplane design as it has the best compromise between speed and maneuverability. Over the course of development, fuselages went through many changes in its composition featuring framed wood, plywood construction, and metal tubing. They were usually streamlined and covered in fabric.
Most of the aircraft were designed with the engines in the nose, especially after Anthony Fokker's perfection of the interrupter system. That allowed pilots to shoot directly out of the cockpit and through the propeller's arc. This was accomplished by having the trigger timed with the crankshaft. In summary, the Great War has significantly impacted the development of the aviation world. It's fair to say, the trend in combat development and technology was over bigger engines, faster airplanes, higher flying, better maneuverability, and longer range. Ultimately, a more reliable aircraft. As we wrap up our presentation, we would like to test your knowledge. What engines dominated World War I? Rotary engines, V-type engines, turbine engines, gliders. The answer is rotary engines. Rotary engine dominated 80% of World War I aircrafts. Anthony Fokker invented the interrupter system. True or false? The answer is false. Anthony Fokker did not invent the interrupter system. Instead, he has perfected it. Rotary engines were favored over other engines because great power to weight ratio, very efficient, great maneuverability, all of the above. The correct answer is great power to weight ratio. What was a side effect of inhaling or ingesting castor oil? Loss of vision, diarrhea, loss of consciousness, or terminal illness? The correct answer is diarrhea. Pilots who inhaled or ingested large amounts of castor oil had symptoms of diarrhea. As we finish off this presentation, I hope that our video was engaging and knowledgeable. We thank you all and best wishes to all our fellow classmates on the oncoming levels.